This video is sponsored by Full Moon Features. If you or someone you know loves horror collectibles, be sure to check out Full Moon's Tiny Terrors, the perfect gift this holiday season. For more information, click the link below, or stick around till the end of this video.
Ho, ho, ho.
Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters. And yes, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We are back with December to Dismember. Yes, again, all the creatures are stirring. And this time we are back with Luke's pick. So we kind of agreed on Gremlins. And we each took middle picks. Mine was Shin Godzilla, as we just spoke about. And then yours here is The Blob from 1988. Very, very awesome film. Definitely something that I got to credit you completely with introducing into my life. This was one that I'm pretty sure that I had maybe seen something about it, or maybe it was something that caught my eye at a video store, because I mean that cover is pretty iconic, but it's one of those things where I just never really got the inkling to check it out until you had recommended it to me. And that's why I'm going to pass this off to you here, Luke, since this is your pick and you are, the certified Blob expert. Why don't you take us away with just what was your first exposure to the Blob?
Well, looking at this one, as I'd said on the channel a few times, I really grew up in horror, so it was really hard for me to kind of decipher my first introductions into horror. My father was really big into Stephen King, so, being bombarded with a lot of Stephen King properties. But The Blob was always something that I had seen as a kid, always one of those ones. I'd seen the original as a kid. I've never went back and revisited that one. And then this one was always on the television, and I would come in and out of it, random things. You always remember the Blob itself coming in and terrorizing. It's one of those images that I think gets ingrained in your head after you see it, just from a stylistic perspective, I think. So this one I had seen as a kid, and then went such a long period of time without ever seeing it because it wasn't on TV. It wasn't really streaming anywhere that I, really had done research to find. It wasn't on, the usual suspects. And then, one day I was just reflecting on my viewing of The Blob as a kid and really wanting to watch it. Turned out it was on, I think is it Sony's streaming service? I don't know if it exists anymore. Crackle.
I remember Crackle.
It was on there, and I instantly turned it on, and they must have not had the HD version on there because it was fully SD. It was a terrible copy of it. But I powered through because it's such a good story. It was even better than I remembered. And then eventually had picked up the Blu-ray from who's the Australian company that does them? Umbrella. It was the Umbrella version of it. Had that one for a little bit of time, and then Scream Factory came out with a release, and now I own that one as well as a VHS, a Laserdisc. You got to cover all the formats there, but this one was something that I grew up with as a kid, and then refound my love for it as it was available to me, because it's such an interesting tale. It was something that, when I talk about those warm and fuzzies, you look at The Blob and it instantly gives you those from a world building perspective.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this was one of those ones that you had recommended to me, and this was something that I didn't check out until the pandemic. So this was one of those ones where at the time, we were all in lockdown. You and I were, meeting up, keeping our circle small, meeting up to record the podcast, doing our thing. And I remember we were just basically trading off Blu-rays at that point. I was using you like a library, and I would just I'd bring over stuff, you'd take stuff, and this was one of the ones that you threw on the pile and were like, yep, this is one you got to watch. I sat down and watched it, and, I obviously trust your opinion. We're buddies, so it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, we do this. We're doing a podcast. I get it. But, man, this is probably, and I said it to you off air a couple days ago, but when we were about to do this, is just this probably the best thing that you've ever recommended to me, as far as just, things that I had so little, knowledge of, or even just something of just like, I don't know, it could be all right. And sitting down to watch this movie, I was just so transfixed and transcended into just, this is, it captures that spirit of an 80s, a solid 80s horror film, in so many special ways. I mean, not only does it hit the mark of being a creature feature for me with the Blob being so interesting, but it hits those same elements that I love in The Thing, and all these other wonderful things. And then there's also a film. It got me interested in this concept so much that I ended up checking out The Stuff a few years later, and then introducing that to you. So it's like kind of one of those things where it's like this movie opened up a lot of doors for me, and I cannot thank you enough for recommending it, because even rewatching it for this review, it's so good. It is literally a perfect time capsule.
Absolutely. And I remember our conversations prior to the pandemic, and I remember really pushing you trying to watch The Blob, and trying to put it in your rotation so you could check it out. Because like watching it, I think it has all the elements I knew you were gonna love in terms of that world building, that the characters, the creature itself, and some of the effects here are just wild. And
Oh my god.
um, going into the film, because I watch this one several times a year, so I didn't rewatch it initially for going into this. But from it's something that where I think a lot of those kills are so ingrained in your head as they happen. And I think there's such a smart kind of dynamic here that they play in terms of that formula where if you watch this, there are a lot of kills heavy at the very beginning of this film, and it really kind of gets you in that state of terror. So then by the time when the Blob is always an element around, but I think you're so heightened to that element of terror by the time they start kind of getting in more into our characters and what they're going through with the government and things like that. You're already terrified of where the Blob's going to be, and you already almost feel like if nothing else happens in this film after the first 40 minutes, it's already a win because of everything that you've seen.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many elements to love about this movie, not only in the sense of just how it is simultaneously a wonderful, again, I compare it to The Thing because it's another 1950s remake.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like it pays homage, it pays, a great like tribute to that original film, yet giving it just enough of this energy and this new, for the time, new life to the film, and bringing in this new concept. Um, and one of those elements here, and going into some trivia about the film, this was one of the things that Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont both were very they were very like not critical, but they were very much inspired by Hitchcock in the sense of how they wanted to subvert expectations in the beginning half of this film. And I mean, nothing subverts you more than the character of Paul uh, getting offed within what, like the first 20 minutes, I think it is,
Yes.
maybe 15, 20
Yeah,
minutes.
to look at the dynamics that you're playing here, where you're introduced to Brian and then Paul, and looking at who's going to be our main central character, I think everyone's going to believe it's going to be Paul, and that relationship dynamic that he has. But as soon as they flip that switch, and in such a gruesome fashion, I think that really, for me, is really what cements this film for being like something that is so unique and so different, and really if you're not on board, you're jumping in the car, closing the door, and saying, "Put the pedal to the metal." Because after Paul's death, I think it really cements you in terms of getting your interest in wanting to see how the thing's going to end.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like you get introduced to all these characters, and it's all the tropes. It's everything that you get this full setup that's like, yeah, we know what's going to happen, and it's still nice. It's still good. It feels again like that perfect 80s, 70s kind of combo of just like, yeah, we're setting everything up. This is what you expect. And then to watch this film just turn things on its head as the film progresses, it's one of my favorite things that this movie does, because again, comparing it to The Thing doesn't necessarily do that, but it just goes straight from the gun by saying, this was a 50s film, we're taking these some elements of it and we're upgrading it. We're going closer to the source material, as to where this one's like, yeah, we're going to take those 50s elements, but yeah, we're going to change some things. We're going to, make Brian Flagg the main protagonist. We're gonna kill Paul within the first few minutes, rip his arms off, but then we're also gonna take like Meg, and she's not a damsel in distress. She's literally, by the end of the film, walking around with an M16 shooting at the Blob. Like, it's ahead of its time, man. Like, this is stuff that a lot of people would criticize today as pandering, but it's like, for this, it's like, no, this is just like really great writing. Like, this is just really earned writing.
Yeah, they really do take you on a journey here, almost, is because we started with all the tropes. We're playing football,
Hmm.
where we have the cheerleader, we have the bad boy that is riding his motorcycle, and you think you're going to understand those dynamics. You think that this film's going to have that specific formula that's going to play into everything that we've seen before. But Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont, they wanted to visually show you those elements and then break all the rules. And we, as an audience, are along for that journey. We visually get to see everything change from the beginning to the end, because these characters are complete. Some some from the beginning are not there at the end, and the ones that are there at the end are completely different from they were at the very beginning. So, when you say great writing, that is absolutely true here, because we want to see that character development. We want to see how these characters change from this just random sci-fi element. And I think that's so charming, in a sense, where you look at the Blob and it could just be about this random creature with some deaths, but we have so much heavy character development and characters that we do connect with, and it's not something that we dive deep into their backstories. We're just diving into the story at hand for the most part, and just because of the writing, the decision making of these characters, we resonate so heavily with them.
Absolutely. And the thing that blows my mind about this too is this being brought to life. Not necessarily, Chuck Russell is somebody that I'm sure, if you're a horror fan, you know his name, because obviously he did one of the best Nightmare on Elm Streets with Nightmare on Elm Street 3 just prior to this, the year before. He's also known for doing things like The Mask. And I don't know if that might have been the last real prominent film in his career. Like, I'm gonna check real quick, but
I think he did Eraser, didn't he, with Arnold Schwarzenegger? I
yes,
don't
he
know how
did
big that
do
movie
it
is, but
looks like he did Eraser, and then, if you're a fan, he did The Scorpion King. But
there we go.
since then, he hasn't really done a ton. It looks like a lot of direct to DVD stuff. But the name that I know is probably smacking a bunch of people in the face, that we've mentioned a bunch of times here. It's Frank Darabont is behind this, and it's like, that's the guy who's responsible for films that we love, like The Mist. And, non-horror films, of course, is most famous being The Shawshank Redemption, but even things like The Green Mile, and he did bring us The Walking Dead. It's one of those things where it's like, this guy, he's a powerhouse. Like, this is one of those names that, you don't, he's a household name, I guess is what I'm trying to say at this point in, our lives. So it's like, to know that he was shepherding this film, it's one of those that's just like, it kind of blows your mind. But you look at this cast and you're like, this is a Frank Darabont movie, because you can see like that loyalty that some of those cast members have. Man, you see faces in this that you've seen in all of Frank Darabont's stuff. Primarily, the sheriff, Herb Geller, is Jeffrey DeMunn. For those who you don't remember, he's the guy who runs into the convenience store in The Mist. And then he's also the guy who, I believe it's in, in Walking Dead, he's Dale.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where it's like, this guy, and he's in about just about every damn thing Frank Darabont makes. And there's also a couple of other great faces in here that I want to mention for my little trivia here. Is Bill Moseley has a very small part in this. He plays one of the soldiers in the sewer. I always forget that he's in this, but Bill Moseley is so recognizable to any horror fan that it's like, as soon as I see his face, I'm like, holy shit, there he is, And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of day players in here that you'll remember from other works from Frank Darabont. And it's just one of those things again, man. It's like, what a beautiful combo we had that, back for 1988, like, in comparison, this is a stacked film.
Oh yes, without question. I mean, there's so many familiar faces from just the horror spaces we talk about. Shawnee Smith. I mean, to have her in here is something where we know what she goes on later to do, and uh, looking at her in this film, such a departure from the Saw films and what I think most modern audiences are used to. But seeing so much talent here, and this is one of those ones going back to like Gremlins, where it's such a complete film where there's great world building but also great characters in here. So you look, it feels like you want to live in that space, in that town, and getting
Hmm.
into those opening shots of it's almost a desolate town and you don't know exactly what's going on. Everyone's at the football game, because it is just that middle America, apple pie kind of. It's a football game. Everyone's got to be there until the game's over, and then we go out to the diner and have a cheeseburger. It's one of those. It's a great feeling that they have, that they encapsulate in this film, and you kind of have that outcast of Brian Flagg out there doing his motorcycle stunts and everything, and then it's just such a great opening, and then complemented by all the dynamics of these actors and the characters in here. um it's just something where I think even if this wasn't horror, I think we'd still have a love for it just because of such great writing in there. But at the end of the day, this is horror. So Dylan, I got to ask you, what is your favorite kill in here? Because as looking back on it, I always can say it's definitely this, but then another viewing of it, I pivot. So for me, it's always hard to deduce which one is my favorite in here, because there again, looking at it, if you haven't seen it, well, I hope we spoil a lot of it for you, but it's still a great film. But just being bombarded with so many great kills within the first 40 minutes of this thing, it I find myself in real time saying, no, that's my favorite kill. And it's like, nah, that's my favorite kill. And then we get to an end where they really jump something, and I'm like, that's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, and I think that the easy answer is the telephone booth. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't love that. I think that just the implication of that and just like being crushed within it, and then also just seeing the sheriff half dissolved in there, it's like it adds just like elements of terror just being thrown on top of one another. One that on my latest viewing that actually it's pretty subtle and we don't see much of it, but just the concept of it is the busboy. I forget. Does he have a name? Do we name him
I
in
don't
the
think
film?
they might, but it's so small that I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not
but
sure.
the creativity and the zaniness of the implication of him being pulled into the pipes
I
is
absolutely
one of
love
those
it.
ones that again I like that a lot. Um, and then yeah, like I mean, pretty much anything that happens to the soldiers and the lead scientist, like when he's getting up in their suits and everything, it's like that's all just really good stuff. Like there again, you're right. There's so many, but I mean in my heart of hearts, I know it's the phone booth. I know that it's that one because it is just again in my mind, I think it's the money shot of the film. It's the one that everybody talks about, and it's for all the right reasons. I mean, it is the same reason as like in the thing, it's the blood test scene. If
Yep.
you talk about favorite sequences, it's because it's like that is an iconic moment in horror cinema. And I think that this is definitely up there for me. But you're right. I mean, I could probably sit here and go through every one of them. But then again, like Paul is also
Very
I
gruesome.
mean, that's also very iconic. I mean, just the arms falling off, being dissolved right off. It's like that shit's insane. That gives me a lot to chew on. But yeah, I'm gonna say it's that for now. It's the phone booth.
And going through this again, and you always pick up different stuff. You mentioned the Blob gets in the suits. Dr. Meadows' kill, for me, where it's so abrupt and it almost feels like a shark attack because
Right.
it goes up, and the movement, that jerky nature before he gets sucked down into the actual sewer, is just something that I think sat with me even more. I don't know if it was just because I had Jaws in my head as I was watching that, because I never really kind of put that together, but it really does feel like such a shark attack scene after that. And just the way they play out these kills, I think is so memorable, because you mentioned the busboy scene, and being taken down into the sink, which is like again, zany, but the way they do it is so wild, and the tension is so built up with the clogged drain and him
Hmm.
sticking his hand down there, and you don't know. You can kind of infer what's going to be happening, but then they kind of play it off for a second, and then he sticks his hand back down there, and then he just starts getting.
It's like it's like any movie that uses a garbage disposal. You know what
Yes.
I mean? It's like it's the same thing, except in my opinion, I think the Blob would be much worse because it's acidic. You're getting sucked right in, and that's one thing I want to talk about is like I love the element that they put in here of like you open it up and obviously in the original I believe, yeah, I'm 90% sure in the very original the Blob it was from space.
Yep.
And
This is that's the thing they switch in this film.
exactly. They do a similar setup though, where it falls from the
Yes.
sky and everything, and you think that it's from space, but it isn't until later in the film that you get the reveal that it is man-made. And I love that. Again, it just adds that whole kind of element of just like we're again changing things and we're flipping things for the better. We're just doing little twists here. It shows not only that these two were m- such big fans of the material, but that they understood how to make it fresh, make it unique, and just give it that extra step, that extra oomph to get it to, what it is now, where it's just this iconic '80s film.
And I love that element of adding that it's man-made, and then the government playing off that to the townspeople that it is not man-made, and actually from space. Where it's I think Darabont and Russell really made that effort to where this is a creature feature, but we're also telling other elements of a story here where in the 80s we're dealing with a lot of distrust in the government, and I think they kind of wanted to intertwine that element into the Blob as well, because you look at it, and obviously as we get toward the end of the film, yes, we have the big opposing force of the Blob, but then we are also working against the government as well, because what does every government want to do? They want to preserve the threat and use it as a military weapon. So I love as we get to the end of it, we have that opposing force and that social commentary that they've so slyly snuck into the film, I think. So again, looking at the film, they wanted to tell a creature feature, but this film, as you dive deeper into it, there's so many more elements at play here that really make this such an iconic film.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite jokes in like any I think like any '80s film is the setup and payoff of the condom debacle
Yes.
between the pharmacist, the priest, and then obviously Meg, the pharmacist being Meg's dad. It's like it's so funny to me because it's like it's they weren't for Paul. They weren't. It was literally for his friend who questionable motives from that guy. Very very got what he deserved for sure. That's another one of those. He deserved that. She did not. But another gruesome kill from the Blob himself. Just the concept of it already being, taking over somebody, and it's like it's that fast. You know what I mean? The
And
body snatching element is great.
and to go from Paul's death, which we're
Hmm.
is still stuck in your head, and then we immediately move into that kill. It's just one after another, because then I think shortly after that is the diner with the busboy. So
Hmm.
you know, we're just being bombarded with so much great gore. I mean, we didn't even touch on it at the very beginning with the gentleman that has it initially stuck on his hand and
Hmm.
then is taken into the hospital. Oh, what a terrifying scene of when is it Brian goes in to check on him, and he's just being, or Paul goes in to check on him, and he's being
Hmm.
engulfed with the Blob, and his eyes are just white. I think some of those visuals that they have in here are absolutely terrifying, and then just to see his body completely gone, except for the very top of it. Again, I was, when I had originally turned this on after not viewing it since a child, I was not ready for the amount of gore that we get in this film.
Yeah, no, I can agree. And I mean, another element to it that is pretty unique for the time is that this is one of those few '80s films that actually does go there, and the kid dies, and it's like I think that the guys over at Red Letter Media had covered this movie a couple years ago, and they bring up a really good point that has always stuck with me, and then especially on this rewatch, is just how that kid is getting harped on by his mom early in the film to make sure he wears his coat or his hoodie or jacket or whatever it is, and it's his jacket that gets him killed. And they are always pointing on, and they point out how it's like it always seems like in any other film the jacket would save him, but no, his jacket gets caught and that's what gets him killed. And it's like, oh my god, that's so cool. Again, subverting those expectations in the best ways.
Yes, absolutely. And that kill always sticks with me. That is such
It's
a
shocking.
gruesome thing.
You
Yeah,
don't
because
think about it.
you're expecting them all to make it out of the sewer, and of course, one of the little kids does not. And then to not have him just be taken by the blob, but to actually pop up out of the water. What
I
a
know.
strong, horrific visual that gives us.
I know. It's no one evil lurks, but it's damn effective. It's one of those ones that's gonna really stick with you for sure. And I there's not really enough positive things I could say about this movie. And if you guys want to hear us talk more about it, we do actually have this up on Spotify as one of the inaugural episodes of the podcast. There, what is this, like the second, third episode?
I think it is. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Was it the third? Maybe.
I think it's the third. Yeah, it's the third episode up on Spotify of the lost episodes as we coin them. But yeah, we talk about it for probably about an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh yeah,
So
we go
it's
through
like,
the entire film. I had all the
mhm.
beats I remember laid out in a sheet. But if we get the podcast up and running, and you want us to put this back on the docket, let us know, because you don't have to twist our arm and talk the blob.
No, clearly not. I mean, this was one of those ones where it was like we were going through creature features. As we said at the start of this, we wanted to do the traditional with, a Gremlins, an all-time Christmas classic, and then we wanted to do a couple off the beaten path ones. Mine was Shin Godzilla, and of course, Luke's here was the Blob. And I think that it's turning out, shaping up to be a nice list here so far for all the creatures we're stirring this December. Because yeah, like I mean, not just creature features, but as far as just horror films in general, The Blob from 1988 is up there as one of the best. It's one of the most memorable. It is, again, one of those films that very rarely I feel this, and this is one that does it, where it grabs you from the first few seconds, holds on to you the entire way through, and as soon as it ends, you're both simultaneously thrilled, exhilarated, but also just a little depressed because you're like, man, I wish I could go back to where I never saw this so I could start it over all fresh again.
And talk about a film that should have had a sequel.
Oh
The
my god,
way we
yes.
end it, and the actor that plays that Reverend, I would have loved, especially the way he looks by the end of this film. I would have loved to see that sequel that we never got, but it was set up beautifully. It always, every time I get to that ending and we end on that hook, I always think of what could have been, because there's so much lore, so many great things established from the Blob. But with so many studios dusting off old properties, maybe one day.
Maybe one day. And if you're listening, studios, I have a pitch. I do. I've written a couple of scenes. I don't have a script, but I have a pitch. So, hit me up at splattercast@gmail.com. And yeah, we'll make it happen. No, I love this. I agree with you. I think that this is definitely one that it just, it's so weird that it didn't get a sequel to me. But again, and it's so simple. I mean, they did a sequel to the 1950s one with the Return of the Blob, so it's like, just do Return of the Blob. And it's like, you're right, you could just do so much with that concept they leave off on, with him being a preacher and going around different little towns and stuff with this little pink morsel that could easily just break out and consume and consume again. Like, yeah, it's just it's endless potential.
Absolutely.
100%. But alrighty, guys, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of The Blob. Let us know what you guys think of this one. Is this kind of an unsung classic to you? Is this one that you wish more people would talk about? And again, check out our full podcast episode on this. And if you want to hear us go even deeper in this, eventually we will be getting back on the podcasting, rounds here. And I think it's going to be here a little sooner than you might think, because we've got one more special video planned for you guys for December to Dismember, ending things, not kicking anything off, ending things with, of course, a modern holiday Christmas classic that Luke and I are both huge fans of. Very excited to speak about it. I mean, you know, we've paid a lot of references to it throughout the month, so stay tuned with us. It'll be out just a couple days before the big day before Christmas, and yeah, it'll be there for your listening and viewing pleasure. But other than that, we still got our promo with Tiny Terrors going on over at Full Moon. So definitely hit that link down below to check those out and get yourself a mystery box. You can get any of the characters from some of the Full Moon features. I know we're big fans of Radu and Blade and a few others. So check them out. But yeah, guys, I think that is going to wrap us up. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, Merry Christmas.